Okay, welcome to this session. I think everything is working properly tonight. At least I hope it is. But I've checked everything out and everything appears to be in good shape. Welcome to tonight's Q&A for Monday, February 27th. I know for y'all are looking forward because this is the last week before spring break. And I know many of you are non-traditionals. The idea of having a week off from class is still pretty good. So thank you guys for tuning in. I just want to say I appreciate everybody turning in assignment 4, and I am hoping to have it graded tomorrow or Wednesday. Working through it tomorrow or Wednesday. Y'all should have your grades by Wednesday. And also just to remember, tonight before midnight, you will receive the midterm exam. The midterm exam will be posted into the course documents section, and I will send an email out to everybody with it also attached. And it will be due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time this Friday, March the 3rd. Just to quickly go over what we're going to cover on the exam, there'll be no more than 3 questions, and it will cover the material identified here, or some of the material identified here. Chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9 of Blakely and Lee. And I will just go ahead and tell you, you might want to pay some attention to Chapter 3. You might want to pay some attention to Chapter 3. There's a lot of good information in Chapter 3. When I was reading through, as I was preparing over the last couple of weeks, Chapter 3 really stuck out in terms of looking at theories of growth and development. There's also a lot of good information in Chapter 5 in terms of 6 stages of planning. But Chapters 3 and 5 really are probably, there's a lot of good information in all these classes, but I would say 3 and 5 are really, from the textbook standpoint, perhaps the most important information that you can pull from the text that we've read so far. You also, of course, have some additional readings that I'd like for you to look at, how an introduction to regional economics, how to read the economy of Primer, and unearned income and local employment growth in North Carolina. I've either shared the links to these articles online, or I've provided direct access to PDFs of these articles in the course documents section under readings. There's also a couple of lectures I'd like for you to look at, and there might be an extra lecture to help oversee one of these chapters that I might post tonight. One of these two, I might post an extra lecture just to help out, but it'll tie to one of these readings. And it'll just be simply an overview of one of those 2 chapters. The Joe Max Higgins interview is something you also might want to take a look at, as well as remember, I might ask you to refer to the information that you have prepared in assignments 1 to 4 to answer one of the 3 questions, up to 3 questions. It may be 2, maybe just 1, but no more than 3 questions that you will have on your midterm exam. There were some people who had asked a question or two about how, when I was grading exams, talked about how I do charts and about cleaning up charts to be more presentable. And I want to say this. I know most of you are using using the wizard that's kind of built in when you use the automatic features when developing charts in Excel. And when you're starting off and when you're doing it for internal reference, that's fine. But as you are working on being better presenters of information, and this is something that comes with time, so nobody's an expert on it. I'm not an expert on it. It takes time to develop a skill. You have to kind of start thinking about, okay, what is it that I need to do when I'm conveying information? And if I was to suggest somebody to read up on, and I know that some other MPA programs do this, but I would read up on Edward Tufte, Tufte spelled Tufte. He does a lot of work in talking about visualization. He actually wrote 2 very short little pamphlets that you can order through Amazon. One is on PowerPoint, actually, and the other one is on data visualization. And then there's some other work that was done by a guy named Stephen Few. And I've had a chance to look at both of their works, and what I will show you right now is kind of some lessons that I've learned from that, as well as some lessons I've learned from some other teachers about how to build a chart that is perhaps more able to tell a message and goes beyond just simply what you get in Excel. So I have pulled some data. This is, if I believe correctly, national personal income, and I've already calculated real personal income adjusted for inflation. So all I'm doing in this example is comparing personal income in terms of actual dollars to real personal income that's been adjusted for inflation. And you can see I've done my index. I've indexed 2001 to be 100, and I've indexed it out to 2011. And then I've used that index to show a differential between 2001 and 2011 between actual personal income and real personal income. And so what I want to do is build a chart that shows this data and really shows what the data is and gives the proper descriptive information. It's also important to remember that when we look at these numbers, like here in cell B2, that we're looking at this number in thousands of dollars, which means you add 3 zeros to that number, and it actually is almost $9 trillion at that point. This number is $8.98789 billion. You add 1,000 to it, it becomes $8.98789 trillion. And of course, it grows to 13.233 trillion by 2011. And then in personal income, as you can see, it grows much slower. So normally when you build one of these line charts, you basically just highlight the cells you want to show. You go to insert. You click on the type of chart you want to create. It was a little more complicated when you worked in the older versions of Excel. In these newer versions of Excel, that's already included in the ribbon that you work with. You click on line chart, you click the 2D option, and this chart shows up. And as you can see, you've got your 2 charts. It's already created. In fact, it's actually created 3 lines because for some reason, when it auto sets, it automatically takes row 1, which is your header, and says, hey, that's going to be a line as well. Now, we know that that's something we want to take out. So what we need to do is edit this chart, and we want to edit it to be easier to understand and easier to see the data. Well, first thing I want to do is right click on the chart, and I can actually move the chart. Some of you are able to do this, and I'm just going to create a new sheet, and I'm just going to label it income, and it moves this chart to its own sheet. And this is a little easier to work with because you've got a lot more space. When you see the instructions for the midterm exam, it is going to ask that you actually copy and paste these charts as images, and I'm going to show you how to do that. If you don't know, you can always go to Excel help to figure out. But when you're working with Word documents and you're working with charts, my recommendation is you always copy and paste them into Word documents as pictures. The same is true with Excel tables, unless you want the tables to be active Excel documents. You can copy and paste an Excel document, an Excel spreadsheet over as an actual living spreadsheet, or you can create a spreadsheet in Word. But from the standpoint of wanting it for visualization purposes, you might want to copy and paste it over as a picture. It depends on how you want to work with it. In this case, that's just something to think about when you're copying and pasting, and I may be going ahead of myself. But we have created a separate tab or worksheet in the spreadsheet for this chart that I've created. The first thing I want to do is I want to provide a better descriptive title. So I click on the title, I highlight the field, and I want to show, and I'm going to retitle it. And I'm going to, and what I want to do is I actually want to take it to trillions of dollars. And I do that, and I'm going to be very descriptive about it because I want people to understand in the header exactly the information that they see below it. So what I am doing is I'm going to come back actually here, and I'm going to go 2001, trillions of $2001. And that's because I've set my base point, as you can see here, in 2001. So I've reset the header. I've relabeled the header to be very descriptive of what the data they see is below. The header is very important. If you do it right, you're able to properly describe the information below. The next thing I want to do is I want to take these little plot axes out. There's no real reason for them. When you look at data, when you look at how certain visualers tell you, they say there's really no need for them. So all you got to do is highlight them and click on the delete button. Hit the delete button and they're gone. The next thing I want to do is right click on select data, because what I need to do here is I need to change the the bottom label, the bottom axis labeling to actually read the year. So I've got over here, I've got my horizontal axis. I'm going to click on edit, and I'm going to select the range. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to pick these years, and I'm going to change that. Click OK. And as you can see, the other thing I also want to do when I go back is I also want to remove description. We don't need that. We don't need that field. So let's remove that. And I also want to change these numbers because, honestly, I don't need this information thousands of dollars, and I'm going to show you how we're going to make everything work. So I'm actually going to change the name and edit series. Actual. And then I'm going to change this one to real. So I'm just going to type these into series name. And you can see how you can work into these fields to actually adjust what you need to adjust. So let's go back to here. And you see that I have removed, that I've cleaned this up down here at the bottom. And what I want to do now is I want to increase the size of my axes. You want to make sure the axes are easier to read. So I'm going to increase them to 16 point on both axes. I'm also going to increase the legend down at the bottom for the two lines to 16 so people can read it. And then I'm going to increase the header to 20. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and get to 24. And if I wanted to, I can actually go in there and adjust it to make it a little easier to read. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the scaling of the vertical axis. So I right click on the axis, go to Format Axis. And as you can see here, these features here over here appear: axis, options, minimum and maximum. I want to adjust this from 0 to 15 trillion. The 15 trillion. And trillion is 10 to the power of 10. Tens of trillions is 10 to the power of 10. So what I'm going to do is, in this case, because we've added 3 zeros to it, so it normally would be 10 to the power of 13, but because we've already taken 3 zeros off because of the original adjustment. So what we do is we're going to adjust this to 1.5 because you want everything to be either in 5s or in 10s when you're doing charts in the vertical axis. You either want it to be in sets of 5s or sets of 10s. So that sets our minimum at, as you can see, it goes from 0 to 15 trillion. And then the major units, I'm going to set that at 5 trillion. So that's going to be 5E9. And that, as you see, reduces the number of marks. Then I come down to number, and this is the real thing you have to do. I'm going to add a custom numbering, and this is important because what we're going to do here, you can see here that it's already converted back to a traditional number. And as you can see, that number is 15 billion, which because we are originally working in thousands of dollars means it's 15 trillion. So what we want to do is convert this to where we only see the first two numbers, because remember, we're adding a tick mark every $5 trillion. So what we're going to do is we're going to convert this from 15 billion to a measure that really indicates trillion. So we come over here to this format code area, and we're going to clear it out. We're going to put a dollar sign because we want to show it in dollars. Then we're going to put a number sign, which is shift and the number 3. Then we're going to take 3 commas, 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to quote, capital T, quote, hit add. And what you see right there is that we've converted it to trillion. So you can see that that number now has been simplified to trillions of dollars. And this is how you take data. This is kind of an example of taking the data that's provided, looking at how they scale it, and then converting it so that you're able to clearly show what you're trying to present in a chart. And what we see here is that even though both actual personal income and real personal income have grown, obviously the rate of real income has grown at a much slower rate than that of actual income, because obviously with real income, we're adjusting it for inflation. So you have the inflationary effect, particularly when you have a decline like we saw between 2007 and between 2008 and 2009. So what we want to do is we want to make these. I mean, these color selections are relatively contrasting, but I prefer to use stronger color contrast. So with this lower color, I'm going to highlight the line, right click on it, and in the fill area, I'm going to convert it to some color of blue. And I actually can use that with the outline. It's the outline that I want to switch. And you can see that. The other thing I can also do is change the weight. And I like to do this just to make it more prominent. So I'm going to change the weight on all of these to a 3-point weight. And it just makes it more visible. And you can see, and you kind of see as time grows that gap increases. And this is as much true with total income, and it's especially true with per capita income, particularly in those areas that experienced high unemployment, where fewer people work. You really see that gap grow, especially when you start doing comparisons between locations, between national, the state, and perhaps your locality, because there's greater differentials between one county and another. And of course, they all contribute to create the state overall and the national overall. Now, when you want to take this and you want to copy it over to a Word document, you would highlight the area around it. Then you come up here in the upper left-hand corner to copy. And instead of just copying it, you copy it as a picture. And then when you come to copy picture, you want to show it as printed, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to convert it to how people would see it in the printed form. Copy it as picture, leave the formatted picture, click OK. It has copied it as an image. Let's go back to one of the Word documents I created, the outline of topics for midterm. I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm just going to go Control V. And you can see that's an image. So that image has been created. It's something that can be manipulated as an image, but it's not adjustable. In other words, one of the things you may notice when you copy and paste a chart over from Excel, just a standard copy and paste, is that if I was to adjust the size, the page might change. The graph itself might change with respect to the size. When I do it here, the page does that graph, that chart doesn't change. And the reason why is because it is an image. It's like a JPEG or a PNG file. It's purely an image, and you can change the size however you want without changing anything about the chart itself. You can do the same thing. We're going to come back down here. You can do the same thing with numbers in a chart. Let's go back to, let me just show you. And I'm just going to take these 5 years just to give you as an example. Do the same thing. You see how you don't see the grid lines that you see in Excel. Everything is just very blank. So you might want to, in cases like this, when you're copying and pasting, bold the row, the header row. Make sure the header row is boldened or underlined so that you can separate it, so that it shows as the header row for the lines that are, for the cells that are beneath it. So that's another example to look at. So are there any questions? Let me go back to chat. Those are the things I wanted to show in advance of the midterm. Are there any questions that anybody has in advance of the midterm exam? Yes, I hope it was. I hope that was clear. And I know that trying to watch it on a webinar is not exactly the easiest way to look at it, but there's a lot that you can do. The goal with charts is to clean them up, to remove a lot of the busyness in them, to keep legends down to the bottom. Don't let you want to use as much horizontal space as you can for visualizing the information. Leave the legends down below, leave the header at the top, and try to do everything you can to clarify that zone where the chart is to visualize it. The other thing I will tell you is do not use pie charts. Pie charts are a waste of time. The types of charts you should use, either line charts, bar charts, and they can either be horizontal bar charts or vertical bar charts. But and a vertical bar charts are good with respect to series of time. That's when you should use vertical bar charts. Horizontal is when you're sharing separate types of information. Like, for example, if you were showing employment comparing multiple jurisdictions, like multiple counties, that would be a good time to use a horizontal bar chart as opposed to a vertical bar chart. Vertical bar chart would be good if you're taking one jurisdiction and showing it from year to year. But a horizontal bar chart would be good when you're trying to show, like, say, one county, County A, County B, County C, and County D. So those are some examples. Also, avoid the use of 3D charts. Only use 2D charts when you're doing it as well. 3D charts do absolutely nothing to help you when you're trying to show data, particularly the comparison, because as you saw with this chart that I just showed you, the key thing you're trying to show is the difference between that one line and that second line. That's what you're trying to convey, is that there's a difference between the two. You're trying to show the value of both. What you're really trying to show is there's a difference between the actual and the real adjusted for inflation. And the same is true when you're trying to convey any kind of information for comparative purposes, is you're trying not only to show the value of each set of data, but you're really also trying to show their difference. And limiting it, bar charts and line charts are really good at doing that. Most other means of charting data for visual presentation are not very good at showing differences. Yes, it's going to be pretty standard with what prior assignments. I'm just trying to show you some of the tips that I've learned over time. And look, I've been working with this for 20 years, and I've especially learned a lot in terms of improving my visualization over the last 10. So what I'm showing you now is basically the baby steps. And it takes time. But I can tell you this, 10 years ago, I was using pie charts for a lot of things, ran into somebody who said you shouldn't be using pie charts. And when he showed me the examples, it made it very clear that I should avoid pie charts. Pie charts are easy to use because people think of pies as a whole. But when you're trying to look at really comparing data from one variable to another or one set to another, they really don't do a very good job in terms of comparing data within a data set or within an assessment. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, total employment and civilian labor force. Okay, or total population, I think is what I asked you, Elijah. But so total population is the total population of a given location. That includes all areas. If I use past pie charts in my assignment, that's bad. I will forgive you for that one. I've only told you now, so don't worry about it with the last assignment. We'll be okay. Going back to what Elijah asked about, and I appreciate, because he did ask me about this a couple of days ago. So when you're looking at table CA, and I think it's in CA05, so let me pull that up here, and then I'll show you. Pull up CA05N. So let me. So in CA05N, no, I'm sorry, it's in CA25N. Sorry about that. So let me go back to CA25N. So you have total employment here in line 10, and that's the total number of jobs in a given jurisdiction as defined in the table. Could be the state, could be nationwide, could be a given county. You, in your previous work, calculated populations, and employment to population ratio looks at total employment divided into the total population. That includes people who would not be work age population. That includes people who are young, old, infirmed, who would not be considered part of your labor force. Labor force is actually calculated separately. And that's important because the labor force is actually manipulated on a regular basis. Nationally and statewide, it's manipulated, I think, pretty much on a monthly basis, and it's even done so at the county level. When they do the monthly employment reports, they manipulate the labor force, and that is actually where we have problems with the unemployment rate, because if you reduce your labor force as you're reducing your employment, you can have a low unemployment rate, but at the same time have a small labor force, and as a result, you're still losing jobs. So while your unemployment rate may look okay, your unemployment rate may look below double digits or below 9% or below 8%. It may look close to the statewide average. You look at where you were in terms of number of jobs compared to where you were 10 years ago, you're still significantly below there. You look at your population, you look at your labor force, and you realize, wait a second, I have low participation in my overall employment. Whereas when you look at jobs compared to overall employment, that kind of tells you how many people do I have producing or working compared to the overall population of citizens I have. So labor force and total population are not the same thing, because not everybody in a total population works. Labor force is adjusted to reflect not only age and other characteristics, but it's also adjusted to reflect people who may be coming off the rolls due to the main reason why is that they stopped looking, because the statistics, the statisticians at Bureau of Labor Statistics only actively track those who are actively looking for work. Now, at the county level, at localized levels, those numbers can be a little iffy, and of course, then they magnify to a national level. But nationally, that average, that gap overall in terms of where we are compared to where we would be is a little less. But the reality is, if I'm on unemployment, if I was someone who had a job, I go on unemployment, and at the end of my time in unemployment, when my unemployment expires, I still haven't found a job, and it looks like, well, I'm not looking for a job, they're going to take me automatically out of the labor force. That can be a serious problem. Database that takes retirement into consideration, not a good one. I would say that's where you kind of have to look at your population projection, at your population by age. And some of you have started to look at that. There is a ratio, there's something called the dependency ratio, which takes, and I think we may have talked about that earlier, but the dependency ratio is very important, and I would say it's especially important for jurisdictions in Eastern North Carolina, because what the dependency ratio looks at is the number of people working compared to the number of people who are either too young to work or too young to work. And basically it says, okay, how many people do you have working, or you have working to not necessarily to take care of those who are in your labor force who aren't working, but who is there to work for all of those who can't work because they're either too old, because they're on retirement, Social Security, a pension, or they're too young, they're a kid. And if you are in both, if you're in that situation, and those dependency ratios tend to be higher here, that can create a challenge as well, because not only does it affect the overall workforce and how the workforce looks, it affects quality of life, because typically products and goods and services are going to steer more towards the economy that's available rather than the economy you necessarily want. Yes, baby boomers are going to alter data considerably, and they already are. And I would say that in a lot of cases, it depends on not only the fact that they're baby boomers, but it depends on who those baby boomers are in terms of what sectors of the economy they came from, and the locations where they are. For example, baby boomers in certain metropolitan areas who had professional level jobs may not affect the situation in the same way as a baby boomer who was working in an hourly position in manufacturing or in a job where they were perhaps laid off and have gone into retirement, necessarily either unemployed or underemployed. There's a lot of layers to this, and it's something that has to be thought about. You can't just look at it as going, okay, somebody goes from being 61 years of age to being 62 or 67, 68 when they would be eligible for that. There are a lot of challenges. And yes, North Carolina has a rising rate of senior population. And you've got to ask yourself, what kind of senior population? Don't look at this in just broad generalities. Think about this. You have a rising senior population. Okay, in this case, retirees moving to NC, North Carolina. Where are the retirees moving and what condition are they in when they move? For example, we know that a lot of them move to New Hanover County, down into Wilmington. We know that. They move along the coast. Normally when they move there, they either are retired and they have investments that they're moving in that area, or there's somebody who has kind of a retirement level job where they're able to use that plus their pension and are able to live. Whereas you have other places where you have retirees, where you have a growing population of retirees that are incumbent, those who had lived there, and they're growing in retiree population. They may not be in as good of a position economically. How does that affect your local economy? There's a professor at University of North Carolina by the name of Jim Johnson who likes to talk about how retirees are a boon to the economy because of their needs. My argument would be, in counter to his, is it depends on the retiree, just like it depends on the millennial. There are certainly a lot of millennials out there who've done very well for themselves, have graduated college, and have gone to major metropolitan areas and are doing good work, as well as those few who have advanced expertise and have decided to move to less developed areas and are getting a premium for the value of their work because there's nobody else out there competing for what they're offering. But at the same time, then there are also those millennials who, for whatever reason, are undervalued from the standpoint of their education, undervalued with respect to the jobs they're doing. They're in extreme debt because of their student loans or because of other factors, and they're unable to work. And I know at some point a little later, as we talk about economic development in the second half, we're going to talk a little bit about mobility, because there's a lot of study right now talking about how this right now, where we are nationally, we are a far less mobile in terms of physically mobile population than we used to be, and how that may be contributing to our overall economic challenges, particularly in areas like Eastern North Carolina. Those are just some thoughts based on evidence, based on data, based on what I have seen in my own work, and I know some of you have probably seen in yours. I think many of you, the counties you chose, you got to see a lot of what is going on throughout Eastern North Carolina, and this is a subset that in a lot of ways, if you were to compare us compared to other subsets of North Carolina, we're not performing at the same level, but it is something to take into consideration. But I appreciate the work you're doing, because as I read your assignments and the differing levels of completion, what I am seeing is I'm seeing many of you get that, okay, here are the things that are affecting it. And that's important, whether you stay where you are currently, whether you actually live or work or have a connection with the county you're studying, or whether you're looking to go somewhere else. You kind of are starting to understand all the different layers of what you have to take into consideration as you develop these economic evaluations. Are there any other questions anybody has in preparation for the midterm? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Guidelines for formatting, same guidelines as before. Basically just, use the same file guidelines, same submission conventions as you used before, and they are in the syllabus. What I would also say is make sure to separate out the questions. Show that there's a separate answer for question 1, a separate answer for question 2, question 3, so on. And I apologize for my deep Southern accent. I'm from Tennessee originally, as I talked about before. So my accent's probably already noticeable. My friends like to say that when I was moving to North Carolina, I was kind of moving towards people who would sound very similar. But the reality is I'm still dealing with a cold and with my sinuses, and it gets really bad when I'm dealing with this. And I heard myself earlier today, and it was really bad. So I apologize if I sound even more nasally than normally. How should we format the midterms in answering the questions? Yes, separate answer question 1 to question 2, or in question 3, and so on. Separate them out so that you show that they are separate. But if you need to use Excel, and you will see this in the midterm, if you need to use Excel, copy and paste it in there. And I would prefer that you copy and paste it in there as images, because the only file that you will submit that I will read is a Word document, not an Excel spreadsheet. I will not look at spreadsheets. I want to see it in the Word document. So you need to copy and paste whatever you need as supporting documentation, whatever you're asked to do. You need to copy and paste it over into a format that I can easily see in Word, preferably as an image, just like I showed earlier. And like I said, my goal is to have everybody's assignment 4 graded by Wednesday morning so that you have a chance to look at the assignment before you finish up your exam. The exams are due by this Friday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern so that everybody is done and you can enjoy your week of spring break, which for some of you may be an actual week of break. For some of you, it may be a chance to catch up on work. For me, it's finishing up budget prep. It's continuing budget prep for the city that I work for. Whatever it may be for y'all, that's what it'll be. And then we will get back together 2 weeks from tonight for another discussion. Okay, seeing no further questions, I am going to go ahead and close up for tonight. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I appreciate it. And I just want to continue to thank you for your continued involvement. I'm really impressed with the work you're doing. I know a lot of this is self-study, and I think in some ways it's the best way to learn, and I definitely will be working more with you as we move forward. And I apologize if you feel like I've not given you enough instruction, but I think you will see with the midterm that I have tied it to the level of self-study you've done. So I think y'all will be happy with that. But again, remember the work, remember what I've asked for you to look over as you're preparing for your midterm. Thank you very much, and have good luck on your midterm. And I look forward to talking to you all in 2 weeks. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. Preferably email me at my work address. I do check both addresses, but do email me at my work address because I do check that on an ongoing basis. I do check that one in real time. So thank you all very much, and I will talk to you all soon.